Everyone's on mute.
Sorry, we've got some. Can we click the Ask to Unmute button?
Everyone's on mute. She submitted. I just didn't hear anything.
Can you hear us, Rachel?
Yes.
Fantastic. I'm handing over to you. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Cool. Right, let me just share my screen. Sorry, I've got questions in front of my face. Right, okay. I'm just going to share screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh.
Can you enable that, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Cool.
Yeah, I've got to do it. No? Can you do it? You can do it.
Can you see my presentation?
Yeah.
No, okay, hang on. Sorry. Right now. Does that work?
Yep. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So thank you very much for having me here today. I'm going to talk to you about a recent report we launched on pedestrian trips and falls. And as I was explaining to Adam, I've literally just had COVID and my brain is not definitely up to speed yet. So if I trip, which I will at some point in this presentation, please forgive me. I'm the Policy and Research Manager at Living Streets and the author of the report, which was funded by the Department for Transport. So I'm going to go over the structure of the report, which covers a literature review, a series of street surveys, a local authority survey, and then we looked at hospital admissions data as well. I'm literally going to have to fly through because I've got 8 minutes and there's a lot of information. So the literature shows that people who fall outdoors are generally fitter than people who fall indoors, and that's because they walk. Falls can be because of inattention, but it's also likely to be footway faults or potentially due to the weather. There can be hotspots, for example, in high density residential areas, but we don't really know how many people are falling. It was estimated that there were 76,000 admissions in England between 2007 and 2009 to hospital, and that was 3 times the number of pedestrians involved in vehicle crashes over that period. If we look at the literature again, the number of people falling is estimated at 10% of the population for folk over 65. And that's about 1 million people in England. And these will be classed as the most expensive group of traffic injuries. And again, it's linked to the age and the profile of the injury. So, for example, hip fractures, these can lead to people being homebound. And so you can see that the ongoing cost is what you're taking into account there. If we had more information on pedestrian falls, it really could reprioritise spending on footway maintenance. But in order to get that information, we have to understand a bit more about the number of falls that are being reported, the kind of faults that are being reported, how many personal injury claims are being made, and also more about the hospital admissions themselves, which is what we sought to do as part of this report. We also went out and just had a look at a representative sample of streets because, we wanted to know why people are falling. And we looked at 10 streets across England, across a range of different street typologies based on the well-managed highway code of practice. And they all had problems. And this is kind of backed up by a much bigger study that was done by GAST for the Department for Transport. And they went out in 2019 and 2021 and surveyed 35,000 miles of footway. And this was in rural, semi-urban, urban and ultra-urban settings, and concluded that footway condition had continued to decline across all streets. And they came up with a one-time catch-up cost of £1.695 billion. So that gives you a bit of context for the footways where people are falling. We went out and talked to local authorities. So I sent a survey to all the chief highway officers in England, but also chief legal officers, because I wanted to know about personal injury claims. We had 23 usable responses, and those were supported by 4 interviews with highway officers. And that was looking at a 3-year period between 2018 to 2020. It's quite a low response rate, but the actual survey itself was quite a complicated one. And you'll see that even within those responses, not everybody answered every question, because a lot of information was required. And as you can see, I was interested in number of falls being reported, number of faults being reported, number of personal injury claims being made. But I was also interested in how that information was being collated, because what we don't have is a way of comparison across local authorities. And both the footway faults and injuries that were being recorded were categorized in quite contrasting ways. So there was no easy way of making any cross comparison. What I can say is that the most injured part of the body is the ankle, and the most frequent injury types were breaks and fractures. And I am galloping through this, so please excuse me. We get through to the claims though. On average, there were about 354 claims settled in 2018 out of 1,800 made. So that's a 19% rate of success. So most people who fall probably don't make a claim, and most claims are not successful. And this is where a local authority will be using a Section 58 defence. Essentially, if they've gone out and done the inspections as they say they would, then they basically have done what they say they'll do and don't have to pay out. There's a bit more to it than this, but obviously I'm dashing through. How much was paid out? Well, in 2018, those claims came to about £2 million. It went down to about 900,000 in 2020. If we assume, and it is a very rough assumption, that the number of respondents was a representative sample, then it works out at about £15 million in 2018 for England as a whole, going down to 7 million in 2020. So quite a sizable sum. I'm going to quickly go through to the hospital admissions data though, because this is where we have the only national source of information on pedestrian trips and falls. And even here, the data that we purchased was just for admitted patient care, so it was overnight stays. It did not include A&E presentations or outpatient presentations, because those databases at the time weren't collecting information on the cause of the injury, only in the admitted patient care for overnight stays. And what this shows us is that certainly for 2018 and 2019, we're looking at about 30,000 admissions annually. And the admissions don't vary that much by season. If you look at the bar chart, you can see that there was a definite drop-off in April 2020, which ties in with lockdown. But other than that, I think the mild weather means that we haven't had the huge variation that you might expect with winter. But I just want to show variation by age. It makes a huge difference, and you get peak falls in the age sort of 80 to 84. And we see more women falling, but that's because there are more women alive at that age. So the actual fall rate is about the same. If you look at the injury profile, the most common injury with age for women is a fracture of the femur, so that's a broken hip. And for men, it's also actually fracture of the femur, but with open head wounds alongside that. Just want to quickly summarise the hospital admissions data. So we've got about 30,000 admissions a year. Of course, this didn't include A&E presentations. The cost is the key thing here, and there's a minimum cost of 22 million and a maximum cost of 98 million. So this is based on the unit costs for a finished consultant episode. So I'm again galloping through this, but we know that the number of falls is underreported, and there could be as many as 1 million for adults over the age of 65. We've got hospital admissions as the only reliable source of national data, because at a local level it's not consistently collected or shared. And it would be good if we could do that cross-referencing. If we look at the costs though, system-wide study in Torbay estimated that the cost of pedestrian falls could be as much as 4 times the initial cost of admission. So this is the community and social care costs. And what we did was we took that 98 million that we saw before for the admitted patient care and times it by 4, and it brings it up to about £500 million, which in comparison to the £15 million for personal injury claims is huge and could rebalance how we spend money on footway maintenance. And it makes sense to enable healthy aging, and healthy aging really needs good pavements. So our recommendations were around the standardisation and improvement of data collection, the need to integrate the costs to transport and health budgets, so the costs to transport and health of poor maintenance, and ensure prompt treatment. And any questions? Sorry, I have literally jumped through this so fast. But I'll answer any questions as I can.
Thank you, Rachel. We'll go to questions right at the end, if that's okay. Unless there's any on the screen and you can see them and you want them in the questions box, feel free to dive in and answer anybody's that are on there that you can on screen, but we'll come to them later on.
So I'm going to try and stop share. Right.
There we go. And I've now got Chris here in the room. So I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's the Senior Policy, Public Affairs and Campaigns Manager at the Guide Dogs for the Blind Association. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, and apologies for being a bit late. I did think I gave enough time, but they decided to deconstruct someone's microphone ahead of me in security. So I got a bit helpful. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation with me today, so I've got, 8 minutes, and I'll try to keep it fairly brisk. So yes, I'm from Guide Dogs, so many of you will be aware that beyond our providing the guide dog service, that we also campaign on a wide range of issues, from e-scooters at the moment to pavement parking and many other areas as well. We're also one of the largest providers of services for children with sight loss and their families as well. Pavement parking has long been one of the main campaigns for guide dogs. It's consistently been rated as one of the main problems for people with sight loss. So there are 2 million people with some form of sight loss in the UK, and about 350,000 people who are registered blind or partially sighted. We did some research actually with RNIB and Thomas Pocklington Trust, because we've consistently found, yes, that pavement parking is rated as the biggest issue, but lots of people with sight loss aren't in communication with us or RNIB or TPT or any other of the 600 charities in the sector for that matter. So we tried to do what's called actually needs-based segmentation, so speaking to people who don't exist in maybe that kind of echo chamber of this environment, or aren't drawn to us just because they have a particular interest. And we asked about people's needs, wants, desires, about their effect on relationships and things like that, about a wide range of things, from access to education, welfare, access to employment. And the main thing that came back, if there was one significant change, would be accessible streetscapes and accessible transport. Because no matter what you do in life or where you are, that is something that literally brings you together there. So pavement parking was the number one issue. 95% of people with sight loss said that they'd encountered pavement parking on a regular basis. 90% said they had to walk onto the road on a regular basis, and a large proportion, about 25%, talked about lacking confidence to go out of the house. And that's particularly the case because if you know a streetscape is an inaccessible area, then you might be able to manage that. But with pavement parking, there's a degree of a bit like a lottery. It's quite random where it occurs. The inconsistency is key there. And also it has the subsidiary effect that pavements aren't designed for cars. So if you have cracked and broken pavements, then that is a further obstruction, a further hazard to people. And unfortunately, a lot of the data we have on potholes and things covers the whole technical definition of the roadway, which includes the footways. It's quite hard to get accurate stats we found on the damage there, but it is nonetheless anecdotally a common reported issue for us. It isn't just an issue for guide dog owners or people with sight loss in general. We know for wheelchair users, pound-chair users as well, and people with children, people with pushchairs, it's a real problem. So we've been campaigning on this for a substantial period of time. And I know a lot of people here will be very aware of those campaign areas, but the situation at the moment, after many years of private members' bills and working with Living Streets and the LGA and other organisations, is that in England we had a private members' bill that didn't progress, but the government decided in 2020 that actually it was an issue, that traffic regulation orders perhaps weren't the appropriate tool to tackle it. I'm talking about England outside of London here, and held a consultation to ask about 3 different approaches, which were reforming traffic regulation orders, decriminalising obstruction, and introducing a national law, like the one that's been in place in London since 1974. So in London, since roughly 1974, the law has changed a bit on the way. You cannot park on the pavement unless there's a specific exemption. The London boroughs enforce that. There is a bit of variation in degrees of enforcement, but the law is reasonably well understood, and it gives local authorities the power to do that. Because pavement parking is this slightly tricky thing where, running over time, it is specifically an offence to drive on the pavement, but in most parts of the country outside of London, it is not specifically an offence to park on a pavement unless you're by a double yellow line or a drop curb or other crossings, and only the police can enforce that, and we know that they've got other things to do. And also, there isn't actually a very clear definition of an obstruction, so that caused problems as well. So we said yes to all 3, but particularly a national law, so there's a clear an educative role there. It doesn't cause the confusion. You're not having this debate about what is and what isn't an obstruction on like a day-to-day basis. And that consultation closed about, I think it was November 2020. And we're meant to get a summary of results within 3 months, but we haven't had anything yet. Now, people have noticed there was an adjourned debate last Monday with Afzal Khan, and I know some people have spoken in that debate. There were 15,000 responses to the consultation. We imagine they would be quite supportive of a law. Around 70% of people, or over 70% in our polls, consistently say they would support a law on pavement parking. And so we're pushing there, so particularly in England outside of London. In Scotland, we were really pleased working with Living Streets Scotland and other organisations. In 2019, the Transport Scotland Act passed Holyrood, and that includes the law on pavement parking. And that's due to come into force in early 2024. The local authorities are just kind of assessing their areas and setting up the TRAs for exemptions and so forth at the moment. In Wales, it's a bit difficult because road traffic offences are reserved and Traffic Management Act is devolved, so the civil aspect is devolved. And the Welsh Government's going to push through trying to do decriminalised enforcement, which, I mean, we welcome, but we'll have to see how that pans out. In Northern Ireland, obviously, the political situation meant it's not been as top of the priorities there, but the PSNI are doing some enforcement, targeted enforcement action there. And I just wanted to say, you know, I mentioned at the beginning that this was the key priority for people, many people with sight loss. One of the key issues. It's not just about that functional, there is something blocking the pavement, but it's about what that blockage is stopping you from doing, whether it's getting to socialising, getting to work, getting to education. It has a really profound impact. And a large proportion, I think it's at least 1 in 5 people with sight loss reported an injury as a result of pavement parking within a period during our last survey. So this is something that Guide Dogs is going to be returning to with other kind of campaign partners as well, because it's something that we really merits revisiting, and it is alongside other kind of campaign areas that we have. So again, slightly gone through there quite quickly, but if you any questions in the end.
Excellent. I've just asked my team to resubmit another written parliamentary question on where is the paper consultation. So we will continue to ask where that has got to. Thank you very much for that, Chris. And I'm going to hand over to Stephanie from Transport for London.
Hi, yeah, let me try and share my screen. All right, can you see that? Do I need to make it bigger?
It's okay.
Okay. Okay. Right, I'm Stephanie Pathak. I'm here from Transport for London. I work in the transport strategy and policy team. So our team's role is to translate the Mayor's transport strategy into policies and action plans that the rest of the business and other organisations can deliver. So I'm here just to kind of set the scene and talk about some of the stuff that TfL is doing. So at the highest level, obviously the Mayor's transport strategy, our aim is for 80% mode share by sustainable modes. We've got our Vision Zero aim to eliminate death and serious injuries from London's roads, and also our health aim around getting Londoners to achieve their 20 minutes of physical activity a day. So in our team specifically, we wrote the Walking Action Plan, which has a vision of London being the most walkable city in the world. And then a couple of targets that we've got in our Walking Action Plan are 7.5 million walking trips per day, and the percentage of trips to primary schools made by walking. Oh, gone too far. And actually we've reached this target early in 2022, and we set ourselves a new target of 60% by 2026. So the Walking Action Plan is grouped into like 4 main areas. So the first one is around building and managing streets for people, and this includes things like lowering speed limits, safer junctions, low traffic neighbourhoods, school streets, improved signal phasing for pedestrians, and street care fault reporting. Then on the other side, we've got the planning and designing for people. So this is our Healthy Streets Check for designers, our Planning for Walking Toolkit and Strategic Walking Analysis, which we put out for like everybody delivering walking schemes. And then we've got an area around integrating walking with public transport. So this is things like making Elizabeth Line stations, doing public realm upgrades, and bus stop accessibility improvements. And then leading a culture change, so kind of behaviour change activities like STARS, which is like work with schools, walking and cycling grants, our TfL Go app, and our partnership with Go Jauntly. And we recently published our leisure walking plan earlier, at the end of last year. And this was our first plan for leisure walking in the capital, like enhancing what happened during the pandemic. We're seeing more people walking, enhancing and expanding that and building on that, allowing people to connect with green spaces and better connect local communities.
Steph, are you going to
Yes.
click on to the next slide? Because if you do, we might need it bigger to see the text, but at the moment we're still on the front slide. We're having a technology malfunction.
Yeah, let me try and stop and start again. Right, can you see slide 3 now?
Yes.
And is it big enough?
If it can go any bigger, if you can, is it the view function where you do it as a
Yeah, I think I put it on full screen, and I think
slideshow?
Is that any bigger? I think it's like full screened in my desktop, but not in the share.
Okay.
Let me try full screening,
Okay.
and then
We think it'll be fine, Steph. We can see it in the room. Hopefully everyone else can zoom in. Can't move
I think if I come back to this and do new share, this one. How's that?
Yay, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so that's the Walking Action Plan. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the work that our team specifically do. And this is around our integrated area planning approach. So this is taking all of our strategic data all the things we know about where is it strategically important for cycling, where's the worst places for road danger, where is it really important for walking, and planning in a holistic, joined up way where we come up with schemes that are addressing multiple priorities in one location, or we're coming up with specific schemes to address that specific area of evidence. And this allows us to build a single unified picture of priorities for healthy streets, and that creates like a Transport for London pipeline of schemes that we're planning to deliver. And then this is an example of some of the schemes that we're delivering in Transport for London. So in 2017, we started the Safer Junctions programme, looking at the 73 most dangerous junctions in London. So far, we've done safety improvements at 43 of those, and we're now on the 44th, which is York Road in Wandsworth. And design work is continuing on the rest of the Safer Junctions locations. So since October 2022, we've completed detailed design work for improvements on the Holloway Road, for 10 new improved crossings along that corridor. We've done formal public consultation around Battersea Bridge Junction, which NA Walk, and we'll publish that report in April 2023, this April. And now that we've got government funding secured, we propose public engagement on 10 further safer junctions by 2024, so in the rest of this year. We also adjust traffic light timings to make crossing the road more convenient, so lowering pedestrian wait times. We know that this reduces risky crossings, and it also, we do work to link the signals so that people don't have to wait in the middle so long for busy junctions. And then these are some stats which probably don't mean that much, but like 17,000 hours per day saved time for people walking, and 14,000 hours per day for people walking, cycling or buses. So that's the number of people using the crossings and the amount of times they've saved. But like, I think the most important point is like some locations, the waiting time for pedestrians has been halved. And we work really closely with Living Streets, and each year they nominate a selection of locations for us to review, and they nominated 56 last year and 34 this year. And then the last thing to cover is that we also support the London boroughs to deliver more and safer crossings. So we recently, October, published our local implementation plan guidance, and the guidance asks boroughs to deliver infrastructure to make walking safer and easier and more accessible, by example, for introducing new crossings. So as well as actually providing funding for these plans that they deliver, we also provide them that evidence-based data that I talked about earlier in terms of integrated area planning, so that they're able to deliver things in the most important locations. And then just kind of some high-level stats. So looking back between 1920 and 2021 to 22, so that 3-year period, boroughs delivered 466 new uncontrolled crossings and 274 new controlled crossings. And we've recently reviewed borough LIP submissions for the next 2 years, so their delivery plans for the next 2 years. And in those submissions, we've got over 200 proposals for new or improved pedestrian crossings. And then we also support boroughs to deliver things like low traffic neighbourhoods and school streets, which make it easier to cross the road without needing a formal crossing. Just less traffic makes it much easier. And that's it. My presentation.
Thank you ever so much, Steph. Sounds great. And I'm finally going to hand over to Josh, Head of Transport Strategy and Programmes. Josh, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Okay. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Good stuff. All right, cool. Thanks. Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, I'll be really quickly. Yes, I'm Josh. I head up the transport strategy team. I've been asked just to come and give you a bit of an overview of our recently published curbside strategy, which came out in January. We're about to sort of go into year 1 of the delivery plan for this strategy. So I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview about how we got to where we are now and what we're planning. So before doing the curbside strategy, we kind of wanted to ask ourselves, how do we define what the curbside is? What do we need to do within our current climate action plan to get to the targets that we've got? We've got some very ambitious targets within our climate action plan, one of which being reallocating 25% of our curbside space to more sustainable uses by 2030 and reducing traffic by 27% to mirror the Mayor's transport strategy. So in terms of where we're at now, we want to kind of get a bit of a baseline of the borough. In Lambeth, 60% of the households in Lambeth do not have access to a car. It's about 81,000 households, 190,000 residents. But we already want to sort of focus on actually what is the curbside. A lot of people, professionals probably is a bit of an ambiguous statement, and I think we want to be very clear on what that is. The curbside is the space that is typically taken up by cars adjacent to the footway, which you can see on the photo to the right. We also wanted to visualize the space as well, to give people a bit of an indication about how much public space really is actually used for sometimes private spaces like car parking and other means as well. So we looked at some very kind of catchy stats we could put in our strategy. So we have the equivalent of 579,000 linear meters of curbside space in Lambeth, which is equivalent of Lambeth to Edinburgh. 3.5 block parks, or 51,000, just over 51,000 London buses lined up. Gives people an idea about what the potential is for the curbside strategy. We also wanted to define what is sustainable, what is not sustainable, to try and quantify where we're at. So at the very beginning, we had to do a very kind of hard task of defining what is sustainable uses and what do we want to sort of gear our strategy towards. So on the right-hand side there, you can see all the kind of, I guess, the items within sustainable uses that we think we should be striving towards reallocating. So you've got car club bays there, you've got cycle lanes, you've got street trees, parklets and whatnot. And you can quite quickly see that only a small amount of the curbside in Lambeth is used sustainably, 6%. The rest of it is typically used for parking, 46%, double yellows, single yellows, and driveways. So the huge amount of curbside is not really used for uses that we think are sustainable or curbside compliant. So we also wanted to do a big piece of work about internally what people really want from the strategy. So we spoke to integrated health and adult care about kind of how young people might benefit from the curbside strategy from the work that they do, children's services, etc. And very quickly we've got a kind of a bit of a broad spectrum of what people want internally and externally for the curbside space, as it were. So in terms of where we want to get to, by 2030, we want every street to have a Lambeth curbside basic provision, which is a kind of a minimum level of service, I guess, which is similar to TfL do for cycling level of service. We want a Lambeth curbside basic. So every street will have a minimum level of service set against 4, hopefully, very clear and easy to understand priorities. Priority number 1, enabling accessible and active travel. So people from all walks of life, no matter who you are, what your requirements are, can use the curbside space on the footway. So at the very minimum, we're looking at stuff like all new street trees will not be on the footway. We're currently commissioning, to design work to make sure we have a typology for all trees to be built on the carriageway and a build out. All our micromobility bays, whether it's dockless bikes or e-scooters, will be on the footway. No kind of questions asked about that. There is a lot more you can read on this if you want to get geeky and really delve into some of the detail of this, but for the sake of this meeting, we want to keep it very broad. So yeah, you'll see within that, if you do look into it, there's some very clear commitments. So secure cycle parking every 100 meters on every street. Street trees, wheelie bins and crossovers are not a barrier to everyday accessible walking and wheeling, which is obviously as it is for a lot of people at the moment. I'm sure many of you live on a road where on bin day, there's no chance for someone with a wheelchair to kind of negate their way through that space. Priority 2, which is creating a place of people. This really is, for me, the most important thing. Well, one of the most important things, because I think it's a really good opportunity to bring a bit of vibrancy back to our lives. During COVID, you obviously saw a lot of people really start to prioritise their local areas. So we want to make sure that we've got programmes and a kind of an action plan to make this happen. So next month, we're launching a very ambitious parklet programme. We want a parklet essentially in every ward in the borough in year 1, and then eventually we're going to scale that up, and anybody who wants to apply for parklet should be able to do so. Here's some examples of what we've done in Lambeth, and also some examples from outside of Lambeth as well. So we've got a designated programme manager to oversee this. Again, for this priority of curbside basic, one of them is every resident has the opportunity to apply for a parklet, and also to support the creation of outdoor green spaces. So I can't actually read the rest of it, but that's some of the key basics within that priority. Priority number 3 is increasing our resilience to climate change. We've got some big ambitions, especially politically, some really big manifesto commitments. Claire Holland is our leader. She's very on point with the agenda, and she's asked that we commit to 5,000 street trees planted by 2025, which equates to approximately about a tree every 25 metres on every Lambeth street, which also is enabled by the footway build-ups we talked about. And also permeable surfacing where appropriate as well. That's a big part of it too. So lots of us to take on board when we're implementing this strategy. Priority number 4 is reducing traffic and emissions from transport. So we recognise that car clubs are part of the solution. They're not the solution, but I think they're a really good way, an effective way of really reducing kind of the private car ownership in Lambeth and beyond. So there is a place for them, and we want to really kind of work with these private companies to make sure that there is options for a car club on every street in Lambeth. And also we've got a commitment for all local high streets to have access to a shared electric van for those deliveries, last mile deliveries too. We also, I mean, you might have seen this, you may have not, but we've just been consulting on some of our kind of curbside pricing principles. This is a big piece of work for us because we had to really work hard with our finance colleagues and parking colleagues and across the board really to figure out how we were going to essentially readdress the way we price our emissions-based parking permits. So we came up with some key principles, split into 3. So if your vehicle produces more greenhouse gases, we think you should pay more. If your vehicle produces more exhaust or non-exhaust pollutants, we think you should pay more. And if your vehicle takes up more space and increases congestion, we also think you should pay more. So you can see a bit of an infographic there to give you a sense of that. So as a very basic, we're going to be having a controlled parking zone operating across the whole of Lambeth. We're currently kind of dealing with the sequencing and the phasing of that. And parking fees are set in accordance with the curbside pricing principle. So we've just consulted on quite a considerable increase to our parking charges. We've gone from, well, it's still just finished the consultation, but we've gone from being one of the cheapest boroughs for parking, just your average car in terms of bands, to one of the most expensive. And it is, as you can imagine, it's great. It's quite a lot of responses, and we're working through all of this now, but we're just trying to, address the, I guess, the imbalance in, for example, if you have a cycle hanger space, it's more expensive than it is to have a car parked on your road. So that's something that we're trying to readdress, and we're right at the start of it. That is my last slide. Just worth mentioning, we've got a year 1 action plan. We were very keen to make sure that it wasn't just a strategy with lots of fluffy words and pretty pictures. We wanted to have it with a backed up year 1 plan. We're just recruiting for a curbside strategy program manager now, and we'll be, looking to increase that program far and beyond year 1 and hopefully scale up the ambition. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. It's like a whole different world as the MP for North Devon listening to these presentations. Yeah, the idea that 60% of my constituents could get by without a car is miraculous. Or that you had that many pavements. Yeah. I've got a lot of roads, but I haven't got many pavements. I personally, my instant fear is for people with white vans, that how are they going to work and have to pay more? But I'd exempt people that their work vehicle takes up more space. So do we have some questions, Adam?
Yeah, certainly some. A couple have been answered, but I think it would be really useful.
Okay, sorry, we have a slightly less technical way of passing the questions across the table. So Ian Hollidge, the CFOC committee member, which is thank you very much. I should know this from last week, Ian, because you were with us last week. Thank you for coming again. And he says it's County Council for Bexhill South. Is it possible to change the word from pavement parking, which could include a public space where people don't walk, to banning footway parking, which is where people should be able to walk or wheel in safety with no barriers? Nice question, Ian. Who would like to take that? Sussex is not quite as rural as Devon, but
well, especially as the highway engineers use the word pavement to mean the black surface, as I understand it, and prefer us to use the word footway.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of our campaigning, I think pavement has a certain alliteration as well, and recognition from but I think, I recognise that we could tighten up some of the phrasing around that. I mean, one thing to emphasise, Guide Dogs tends not to use the phrase ban, because it certainly agitates some people, but also the fact that there is no law at the moment, and so explicitly we actually say we want a law on pavement parking that would empower local authorities, because actually at the moment they don't really have the ability to act even if they wish to in most cases. So yeah, that's a good
I hate to say this, but so whilst we've been here, my team have got the answer from the minister, which came back today to the WPQ, which was actually asked by Tanjeet, and this literally has come in today, that local authorities already have a range of powers to help them tackle inconsiderate pavement parking, including via traffic regulation orders. In addition, my department consulted on further measures to address in 2020 and received over 15,000 responses. We have been considering all views expressed, including from those with vision impairments, and the options for managing pavement parking. We will publish the formal consultation response and announce next steps as soon as possible. The table office have queried as soon as possible, and I have asked my office to resubmit a question to get a definition on as soon as possible. So apologies not to have a better answer, but there has at least been one. So sorry, I've got technology now to the next question. Oh gosh.
For readers of Hansard, Afzal Khan had an adjournment debate last Monday, I think, on pavement parking, where the minister said more or less those very same words.
At least he's consistent, even if we don't like the answer.
Yeah.
So the next question is from Laura Laker, and she asks, is economics, i.e. cost benefit analysis, the sole parameter under consideration when funding transport schemes in England, including things like pavements, or do we get the sense investments can be based on other metrics? Should we be looking at transport, including everyday walking, differently? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I've got a thought. I mean, it should be about well-being, surely. I mean, that surely should be the top priority. I live in Lambeth. I hate pavement parking. I haven't got a car, and I'd like some cycle parking on my estate. If somebody could make a note of that. Yeah, but does well-being get discussed?
It's certainly, I spend a lot of time raising health as part of the active travel agenda, because I think it's absolutely vital, and given that one of our 5 points that the Prime Minister is currently working on is to halve waiting lists, we actually know that there's so much data out there that those people that use active travel to get to work are significantly healthier in the longer term. And in the short term, have somebody who walks the whole way around London all the time. I have real issues about things on pavements. Everything, my pet hate this week is bicycles.
Line bikes.
Line bikes. I have a real issue with line bikes. I'm also not terribly keen on people with 3 cups, all those people who sell nuts on bridges. I'm trying to get over Westminster Bridge, and as for tourists having their photograph taken in front of Big Ben, I mean, it's a daily hazard, trip hazard, unexpected trip hazard in the Westminster area. But I mean, honestly, what goes on pavements is
Can we ask that as a serious question to TfL? Because, and I don't know whether it's about boroughs or whether it's a TfL thing. And I'm a big fan of riding a line bike, but honestly, they are absolutely a mess. The centre of London is full of, well, I don't know the rest of it, I don't venture out that far.
and this was the next question from Ahmed Ahmed on the screen as
The centre of
well.
London is full of line bikes, parked, fallen over, obstructing obstructing crossings, obstructing the pavement. I spent a lot, I tend to pick them up if I see them fallen over, but it got to the point when I was walking the other day, because it was a Tuesday, and I just thought, I can't do this, it would just take me too long. What are you doing to fix the problem? Because we're about to get them in Nottingham, and it's one of my worries.
Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure where we're at, but the last I can remember is that we were trying to get bylaws. I think we've got, I'm not sure if we've got them now, around boroughs being able to enforce against dockless bikes, because currently, well, the last I could remember, there wasn't the powers available to local authorities to enforce them. It could be that that's changed in the last few months. I'd need to check with colleagues, but that was the issue at the time, around local authorities being able to enforce them and move them on.
Apparently, you can log on to them using their QR code, and you can actually report them as being in the wrong place. I personally don't see it's really our job to do that. And as I've made the observation, if they're so smart that they know where they are, surely Lime could find them.
Yeah.
It would be my
in terms of
Lime
that they,
are actually on this board.
that they can.
Well, maybe they can.
You could
If
actually,
Lime want to intervene, feel free to wave at Adam.
They
and-
can be geo-fenced where you can.
And so Roger Gethin, nice to see you this afternoon. Roger is on the call and he's asking Rachel, whilst we're negotiating whether Line wants to say anything. Cycling UK found some years ago that maintenance related claims made by cyclists were on average 13 times higher than those made by drivers, probably because they are much more likely to involve personal injury rather than being limited to property damage. We suspect that pedestrians' maintenance related claims would be similarly high. Do you know anything about this, please, Rachel?
Yes, so I did respond.
Thank you. We'll share it for everyone else in case they're not up to date.
Yeah, so we had a speaker from Zurich Municipal come to our report launch, and she confirmed that the most expensive personal injury claims are for cycle injuries. And I looked up a figure for Roger, showed that in 2018 the average cost of a personal injury claim for the footway falls was about £5,000, and he's responded to me to say that that's actually about I think 5 times the amount of a car claim. So for example, if you drive through a pothole, so cyclists being about 13 times the average claim compared to the vehicle claims. So we're more expensive as pedestrians, but cyclists are even more expensive still.
I think we generally need to be looked after a bit better. Alice, so many thanks to Alice from Lime, who's carefully put her hand up, and we think we've enabled her to speak. So Alice, did you want to come to the Lime's defence?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you so much.
No worries at all, and yeah, I'm not probably best to speak, considering the conversation that was going on. A bit of context. So my name is Alice Pleasant, and I'm a public affairs manager here at Lime. In terms of my role, I am helping obviously our general public affairs, but also our rest of the UK schemes, including the one in Nottingham. So Lillian, I think we'll be in contact quite soon. I know you've spoken to the councillors as well. I mean, in terms of addressing some of the issues, that we are aware of the parking issues, especially in Westminster. I think a lot of it comes down to the parking density. So we've seen a very, very large amount of the bikes, and they're becoming very popular in those areas, and that's where people are cycling them to. And it's for us to therefore work out how best to encourage people to park sensibly, to also manage that parking density. And we're aware this is a challenge that we're working on. You might have seen last week we spoke to Westminster Council. We've agreed enhanced parking fine zones in the area. So if people in, for example, Soho, but Westminster are parking irresponsibly, we have increased our fines in those areas. But we're aware there's a lot more to be done, and it's sort of mainly because I think it's become so popular. It's really positive to see so many people cycling, but there's definitely issues around that parking compliance and making sure that we are aware of issues around parking density. And we're working quite hard with councils, especially Westminster, to address that. Is there any questions, I suppose?
You're very brave, Alice.
Can I ask one?
Yes, of course.
Alice, Hounslow isn't licensed for any of the scooter or bike hire schemes, and yet I keep coming across Lime bikes left very inconsiderately on our footways. The scheme in Birmingham I've used, there are cameras on the bikes, so that and I can't remember which company that is. So that
it would be Voy, I think.
It's Voy, okay. But the technology is there to have cameras on the bikes, so you can see whether they're parked sensibly or not. So is there an issue about a weak enforcement of the regulations with the users that could be better?
I think that's definitely something to look into. In terms of Hounds in particular, I must hold my hands up. I'm 2 months into my role at Lime, so I don't have all the answers, but I can come back to you with a written answer on Hounslow in particular. I think there are definite challenges around regulation and making sure there's not a standardization between every single operator, and the ones of Voy very different to ones of Lime. But I think it's interesting what you mentioned about the cameras, and I'm not aware of all the detail about the issues in Birmingham and how that runs in comparison to the one in London, but I can come back to you with the written answer if that is okay.
Thanks, Alice. We'll come to Baroness Jones in the room.
I was going to ask more of the same thing about better instructions to users.
Yeah, I mean,
No. Sorry, carry on, Alice.
I was going to say, one of the things that we do work hard and we're increasing is a lot of our communications to riders come through our apps. So people that download the app, and if you have a Lime app, you'll have often been encouraged to leave your bikes in certain places. We'll like encourage in terms of, we, for example, rolled out a quiz in terms of how best to cycle, trying to improve rider behaviour that way and trying to educate riders on cycling and where best to leave bikes, but also how to ride bikes within London in a sensible way. And we're also rolling out a series of sort of first rider academies across London, essentially to help people who haven't been able to ride a bike before come and learn how to ride a Lime bike and ride appropriately within London.
Excellent. And then I'm going to do just one very quick question, which was answered on the screen from Zolt Schuller, in relation to pavement parking. Are any of the organisations represented in dialogue with any of the big delivery firms, such as Amazon or DPD? Other delivery firms are available. They probably issue their drivers guidelines not to park on pavement, but from my understanding, put the drivers under incredible pressure to do multiple drops, effectively giving them little choice. Did anyone have any comments they wanted to make on that, in case people haven't read the answer on the screen?
Rachel was asked that one.
Rachel, we think you gave a brilliant answer. Would you mind just repeating it for those who hadn't read it? Because I know it's a way back up the list. You're on mute again.
Sorry. I got distracted with my emails. So the last question, what around the economic benefits? Yes. So we did the pedestrian pound, really, to make the case for public realm improvements, and it's actually very hard to get a really good economic analysis because you can't show the do nothing approach of what it would look like if you hadn't done an investment. So cost benefit analysis, yes, is one of the key tools used to evaluate transport investments, but sometimes it just may be that you have an improvement as part of the strategic vision for a place, in which case it will take place once you have the funding available. But there are other economic tools out there, like the Health Economic Assessment tool, which can be used to show the health benefits, for example, of investing in walking. That's kind of what I said. Cheers.
Thank you. And Ruth, I'm going to hand over to you to close.
Okay, thank you very much to Rachel, Chris, Steph, Josh, and also Alice for being put on the spot. Actually, can I ask a question? Have I got time to ask a question of Steph? Where your first photo showed the crossing of Archway on at Hyde Park Corner. Now, I have cycled that, but there's always, especially in the peak hours, hundreds of people on bikes and people on foot crossing in the same direction in the same space. And I raised this with Will Norman when I was on the women's LCC Women's Ride the other week. Is it possible that there's an opportunity for some element of separation on those crossings? Cyclists on the south side and pedestrians on the north side, or something like that. I mean, next to each other, but just in terms of what then happens at Constitution Hill, where the bike path is nearer the road and the footpath is further away. There just seems to be a real muddle, and there are some other places in London where it's great that we've got segregation away from traffic, but segregation between bikes and pedestrians in these really, really busy junctions and crossings would be useful. I just wondered if that's been considered.
I can pick that up with Will. I can take that one away.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much to all of you, and we'll look at that study, Rachel, because I think that's really valuable. It's very, I mean, there's so little in public policy that does seem to have some logical costs, particularly when you're talking about the links between health and roads. The NHS budget doesn't seem to matter too much, unfortunately, to transport planners nationally or locally. And you've made some very good points, but will things ever change? It's good, it's interesting, and I wonder. We had 2 meetings very close together for various reasons. We've got recess coming up in a couple of weeks, and so the next meeting of the APPG Cycling and Walking will be on the 24th of April at 4:30. We've not yet got a topic. Do we have any in mind yet, guys? TBC, to be confirmed. Obviously, it depends on speaker availability, and we do try and keep our topics for these meetings as topical as possible.
We have a showcase on the 18th.
Oh, yeah.
18th
18th of April. Okay, yeah. So, 24th of April for the next meeting, but we've got the showcase on the 18th of April at 11 to 1 a.m. in the Ackley Suite here in Portcullis House in Westminster. We'll have speakers from the Labour front bench. We've got an Active Travel England are coming. We're trying to get a minister. That's proving more difficult. They're obviously very busy. But lots of walking and cycling organisations are contributing, including government agencies and so on. So lots to see and do at that event. So, but all invitations are going out this week, I believe. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone in the room, and thank you again to our speakers, and thank you to Adam and Jack for all the work in getting these meetings together. Thank you. Thank you.